The moment Gerald Thompson raised his pseudo-official HOA security badge and drew his personal firearm, the carefully constructed world of suburban control he had spent decades building began to crumble. Jack Reynolds stood perfectly still, a human statue carved from years of military precision and combat experience. The suburban morning air hung thick with tension, charged with a potential violence that Gerald Thompson could not possibly comprehend. Oakridge Estates had always been more than just a neighborhood. It was a meticulously crafted ecosystem of control, where conformity wasn't just expected, it was ruthlessly enforced. And Gerald Thompson had been its most zealous guardian for over 2 decades. His journey to this moment began long before this. Morning, in the mundane corridors of mid-level corporate insurance, where Gerald had spent 30 years building a career defined more by bureaucratic compliance than any real achievement. Passed over for promotions, forgotten by colleagues, he had found his true calling in the HOA, a place where he could finally exercise the control that had eluded him throughout his professional life. The Reynolds family represented everything Gerald feared and despised. Jack Reynolds was no ordinary suburban resident. A veteran of multiple special forces units, his military career was the stuff of classified legends, missions so sensitive that even his immediate family knew only the vaguest details of his service. Dark-skinned, athletic, with a calm that spoke. Of countless high-stakes operations, Jack moved through civilian life with a grace that belied his lethal training. His wife, Dr. Elena Reynolds, was equally exceptional. A trauma surgeon at Emory University's top-rated trauma center, she had built a reputation for handling the most complex medical cases with a precision that mirrored her husband's tactical approach to life. Their house in Oakridge Estates was a testament to their discipline, immaculately maintained, every detail carefully considered, yet it consistently drew the ire of the HOA's leadership. The grass was precisely cut, but not to Gerald's exacting standards. The exterior paint, while a neutral tone, didn't match the specific beige palette approved by the association. Gerald's war against the Reynolds family had been brewing for months. It started with small infractions. A trash can left out 5 minutes, past the designated retrieval time, outdoor furniture that was allegedly 2 inches too close to the property line. Each citation was a calculated attempt to assert his authority, to remind the Reynolds family that in Oakridge Estates he was the law. Jack recognized the pattern immediately. In his years of special forces operations, he had dealt with far more sophisticated forms of intimidation. This was amateur hour, predictable, almost laughable in its transparent attempt to provoke. But today was different. The complaint was ridiculous. Jack's outdoor grill was supposedly 3 inches too close to the property line. But for Gerald, it was an opportunity to escalate, to finally confront the family that had resisted his authority. What Gerald didn't know was the depth of Jack's military background. Most people saw a successful suburban professional. What they didn't see was a man who had neutralized terrorist cells, who had survived scenarios that would reduce most men to psychological rubble. The confrontation began like a powder keg waiting to ignite. Gerald approached Jack's property, his pseudo-official HOA security badge, purchased online and laminated at the local copy shop, hanging from a cheap lanyard. In his right hand, a personal firearm was drawn, pointed directly at Jack with a trembling intensity that betrayed his inner fear. "Stop right there!" Gerald shouted, his voice a mixture of panic and attempted authority. "You're in violation of community guidelines!" Jack didn't move, didn't blink. His entire body was a coiled spring of potential energy, years of special forces training creating a calm that most people would find impossible to comprehend. The irony was not lost on Jack. Here was a man who had spent his entire life seeking a sense of power, completely unaware that he was threatening someone who could neutralize him in less than 3 seconds. Elena watched from the window, her medical training and years of high-stress environments creating a calm counterpoint to the unfolding drama. She had seen her husband handle far more dangerous confrontations with a surgical precision that was both terrifying and beautiful. Jack's military career was a tapestry of classified operations, missions in regions most people couldn't pronounce, scenarios that would become case studies in advanced tactical training. He had negotiated with warlords, neutralized high-value targets, and survived environments that would break most men, all while maintaining a level of composure that seemed almost superhuman. "Lower your weapon," Jack said softly, his voice a controlled whisper that carried more authority than Gerald's entire performance. Gerald, drunk on his perceived power, didn't realize the magnitude of his mistake. His hands shook slightly, a combination of adrenaline and the growing realization that he might have miscalculated. The backstory of this confrontation stretched back years. Gerald Thompson had transformed the Oakridge Estates Homeowners Association into his personal kingdom. What began as a volunteer position had become an obsession. Every bylaw was a weapon, every rule a potential tool of control. Jack and Elena had moved into the neighborhood 3 years ago, bringing with them a level of discipline and excellence that should have been celebrated. Jack's consulting work in security risk management and Elena's medical research brought a level of professional sophistication to the community. But for Gerald, they represented a threat to his carefully constructed world. The racial dynamics added another layer of complexity. Gerald, a product of an older, more segregated generation, viewed the Reynolds family with a mixture of fear and resentment. Their success, their dignity, their refusal to be intimidated, it all challenged everything he believed about social hierarchies. What Gerald didn't know was the full extent of Jack's capabilities. Multiple classified commendations, tactical training that made most special forces operatives look like amateurs, a network of military and intelligence contacts that could be activated with a single encrypted message. The moment stretched like a rubber band about to snap. Jack's mind was already 3 moves ahead. He could neutralize the threat multiple ways, disarm Gerald without causing serious injury, create a situation that would expose Gerald's incompetence, protect his family while ensuring minimal collateral damage. "This is your only warning," Jack said, his voice a study in controlled precision. "Lower your weapon." The suburban morning, with its perfectly manicured lawns and meticulously maintained houses, had become a potential crime scene. Elena's medical training kicked in. She was already assessing potential trauma scenarios, calculating response times, preparing for any potential escalation. Gerald's finger was dangerously close to the trigger. Years of pent-up frustration, of feeling powerless in his own life, had culminated in this moment. He saw Jack not as a person, but as a symbol of everything that had denied him the sense of power he craved. What happened next would become a legendary story in Oakridge Estates, a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked authority and the consequences of underestimating someone's true capabilities. The aftermath was swift and comprehensive. Jack's military and professional connections meant that Gerald's actions were investigated at multiple levels. The HOA board, once a bastion of Gerald's power, quickly distanced themselves from his actions. Charges were filed. Brandishing a weapon, multiple counts of harassment, violation of federal statutes regarding threatening behavior. Gerald's carefully constructed world of authority began to crumble. The Reynolds family became more than local heroes. They represented a new paradigm of community engagement, professional, disciplined, committed to excellence, while remaining compassionate. Oakridge Estates would never be the same. The culture of petty authoritarianism that Gerald had cultivated began to disintegrate. Neighbors who had lived in fear of HOA retribution started to speak up. to push back against years of micromanagement and control. For Jack Reynolds, it was just another day, another potential threat neutralized with minimal engagement. But for Gerald Thompson, it was the day his entire fabricated world of authority came crashing down, destroyed by the very person he thought he could intimidate. In the end, it wasn't about a grill placement or HOA guidelines. It was about the thin line between perceived authority and actual capability, between fantasy and reality, and Jack Reynolds had just demonstrated the difference in the most spectacular way possible. The suburban morning returned to its quiet rhythm, but something had fundamentally changed. The balance of power in Oakridge Estates had shifted, and no HOA bylaw could ever put it back the way it was before.